also said to the disciples, a certain rich man heard that his household manager was wasting his estate, called the manager in and said to him, "What's this I hear about you? Give me a report of your administration, because you can no longer serve as my manager." The household manager said to himself, "What will I do now that my master is firing me as his manager? I'm not strong enough to dig and too proud to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I'm removed from my management position, people will welcome me into their homes." One by one, the manager sent for each person who owed the master money. He said to the first, "How much do you owe?" He said, 900 gallons of olive oil. The manager said to him, "Take your contract, sit down quickly and write 450 gallons. Then the manager said to another, "How much do you owe?" He said, 1,000 bushels of wheat. He said, "Take your contract and write 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted cleverly. People who belong to this world are more clever in dealing with their peers than are people who belong to the light. I tell you, make friends for yourselves so that when it is, use worldly wealth to make friends for yourselves so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful with little is also faithful with much. And the one who is dishonest with little is also dishonest with much. If you haven't been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? If you haven't been faithful with someone else's property, who will give you your own? No household servant can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and have contempt for the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." The Pharisees, who were money lovers, heard all this and sneered at Jesus. Jesus said to them, "You are the ones who justify yourselves before people, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued by people is deeply offensive to God. Until John, there was only the law and the prophets. Since then, the good news of God's kingdom is being preached and everyone is urged to enter it." It's easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for the smallest stroke of a pen in the law to drop out. Anyone who marries his wife and who divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery, and a man who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery. There was a certain rich man who clothed himself in purple and fine linen, and who feasted luxuriously every day. At his gate lay a certain poor man named Lazarus, who was covered with sores. Lazarus longed to eat the crumbs that fell from the rich man's table. Instead, dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried by angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. While being tormented in the place of the dead, the rich man looked up and saw Abraham at a distance with Lazarus at his side. He shouted, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me. Send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I'm suffering in this flame." Abraham said, "Child, remember that during your lifetime you received good things, whereas Lazarus received terrible things. Now Lazarus is being comforted, and you are in great pain. Moreover, a great crevasse has been fixed between us and you. Those who wish to cross over from here to you cannot, neither can anyone cross from there to us." The rich man said, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my father's house. I have 5 brothers. He needs to warn them so that they don't come to this place of agony." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. They must listen to them." The rich man said, "No, Father Abraham. But if someone from the dead goes to them, then they will change their hearts and lives. Abraham said, if they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, then neither will they be persuaded if someone rises from the dead. Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to trip and fall into sin must happen. But how terrible it is for that person through whom they happen. It would be better for them to be thrown into a lake with a large stone hung around their necks than to cause one of these little ones to trip and fall into sin. Watch yourselves. If your brother or sister sins, warn them to stop. If they change their hearts and lives, forgive them. Even if someone sins against you 7 times in one day and returns to you 7 times and says, I'm changing my ways, you must forgive that person. The apostles said to the Lord, increase our faith. The Lord replied, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea, and it would obey you. Would any of you say to your servant who had just come in from the field after plowing or tending sheep, sit down for dinner? Wouldn't you say instead, fix my dinner, put on the clothes of a table servant and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you can eat and drink. You won't thank the servant because the servant did what you asked, will you? In the same way, when you have done everything required of you, you should say, we servants deserve no special praise. We have only done our duty. On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 men with skin disease approached him. Keeping their distance from him, they raised their voices and said, Jesus, Master, show us mercy. When Jesus saw them, he said, go show yourselves to the priests. As they left, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he had been cleansed, returned and praised God in a loud voice. He fell on his face at Jesus' feet to thank him. He was a Samaritan. Jesus replied, weren't 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? No one has returned to thank God except this foreigner. Then Jesus said to him, get up and go. Your faith has healed you. Pharisees asked Jesus when God's kingdom was coming. He said to them, God's kingdom isn't coming with signs that are easily noticed. Nor will people say, look, here it is, or there it is. Don't you see? God's kingdom is already among you. Then Jesus said to the disciples, the time will come when you will long to see one of the days of the human one, and you won't see it.